It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
UFC Vegas 98 just happened yesterday. You know, people are going to be seeing this video on Monday. They're going to be like, damn, Rob and Tiz are a bunch of slobs wearing the same outfit 2 days in a row. But spoiler alert, we're recording both pods for this week in one day. So don't worry, we do wash our clothes. And we're pretty versatile, dude. We talked boxing in the last pod. Now we're moving on to the UFC. Got a lot to talk about in the UFC Flyweight Division. And there's a lot going down in the whole landscape of that right now. But, you know, to move right on to that main event, Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Taira. Royval wins the fight via split decision, 2 48-47s, and then 1 48-47 for Taira. Royval takes Taira's O, which is obviously very impressive because we haven't really seen Taira tested against a top opponent like this. And Royval gets the big win. And, you know, first of all, we got to say it. What a fight. I do think that this one was pretty crazy. I mean, especially some of the scrambles on the ground in this fight. You know, on the feet, it was pretty fun too. But I do want to say this. I thought it was interesting that it was a split decision because I thought it was a clear 3-2 for Royval, especially when I saw Sal D'Amato's scorecard had the first round for Taira, which I was dumbfounded by because I thought that was one of the clearer rounds for Royval. But nonetheless, Taira still fought a really good fight. Royval fought a really good fight, and he gets the win. And obviously, he's still the number one contender right now at flyweight, sort of, as we'll get to. But let's talk a little bit about this fight, man. First of all, what do you agree with me when it comes to that Sal D'Amato scorecard for Taira? Do you think that I'm in the wrong there?
Oh, no, I mean, yeah, easily. It was each round. It's not like there was a single round that was too close to call. I thought each round had a clear winner.
Yeah.
But you know, it reverts kind of back to conversation, the arguing point you brought up in terms of you either think one guy won or didn't. You know, so like. You can't, for someone to say, oh, you know, I got this guy winning by split decision or whatever, like,
right.
You know, that doesn't really prove a whole lot, you know, because the guy that loses, you know, what's that really going to do for him? So I don't understand why a scorecard for Tatsuro Taira is...
At least the right guy won.
Yeah.
It would have been a bigger problem if Taira would have won, and then we'd be having a whole other conversation here, but... I'm glad you brought that up. That's how you know we've been doing this for a minute.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, because all it really does is like build up that.
Seems fair. Like, what are you talking about?
It builds up that suspense when the octagon announcer is announcing who the winner is. You know,
yeah.
Because then you're like literally holding your breath for like a few seconds. It's like,
I don't know about you.
But in fights like this, it's like there's no way they scored it for Taira, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, dude, whether it's Bruce Buffer or Joe Martinez, like anytime when I hear them say, or, you know, just using Sal D'Amato's scorecard just for example's sake, when he goes, Sal D'Amato scores it, and like when they say the name, that means you know it's a split decision. You're like, oh God.
Exactly.
You just know something weird is about to happen. But thankfully in this case it didn't. But the fight itself, man, like you said, it was it was back and forth between Royval and Taira, which was awesome. I thought Royval won rounds 1, 3, and 5, and then I gave Taira 2 and 4. So it was a back and forth fight, which is awesome for the fans. And I think that both of these guys really proved a lot because Taira got to test himself against Royval, who's obviously been proven at the top of this division for a while now. And he didn't win the fight, but he looked really good at certain points, especially when he would take the back in rounds 2 and 4. He was able to keep that for a while. But Royval, at the same time, his transitions on the ground are really impressive.
Yeah,
on the feet, he looked good.
I don't think Taira gave enough credit to Royval's striking, at least early on. It wasn't until he got rocked and pretty much busted open after the first round that
In round 3 too, the almost ended the fight, and I honestly thought it was impressive that Taira recovered from that and almost got a nice position.
Even at the end of the first round, when they went to the ground and Royval with the heel hooks and stuff, like I just thought, man, that was that's a dominant kind of round, And so Royval's confidence, just going forward, he's got
except for Sal Diamano though.
Yeah,
like I'm saying, I don't get how he's even the third and the fifth. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how he scored it for Taira. I just don't. Which I hate saying that because Taira obviously had his moments in this fight, and I don't want to blame him for a bad scorecard.
I mean, there was a lot of smooth transitions from Taira when he had Royval's back.
I mean, his ground game's
trying to take trying to go for a triangle choke, rear naked choke, but he didn't lock anything in. Royval he did a very good job of maneuvering on the ground too, and so when it got to the feet, he was pretty comfortable there. So
I think Royval clearly was the better fighter on the feet, and then on the ground, obviously, even though Taira had his moments on the back, I think in those 50-50 positions is where Royval's scrambling abilities really were showcased, and you said with the leg locks and all that, he's just so impressive, and especially to do that against a guy like Taira, you have to respect that.
And towards the end of the fight, Royval almost had a guillotine locked in. There was just so many smooth transitions into trying to get guys to each other to tap.
Such a fun fight. And all flyweight fights usually are. The pace for those ones are always amazing to see, and this one was no different, that's for sure. That's why I like watching the division so much. But, dude, this division right now, it's interesting. Probably one of the more interesting ones in the entire sport because of just the lack of clarity right now at the top. You'd think with a huge win like this, the number one contender, Brandon Royval, would be the clear shoo-in for a title shot, but as was announced the same day, that is not the case. And I thought that put a weird cloud over this card and this main event, because then you're like, well, what does Royval gain here from fighting Taira if he's not going to get the title shot? But for those who don't know, Alexandre Pantoja will be fighting and defending his title at UFC 310 against Kai Asakura, who is the Rizin bantamweight champion, has never fought at flyweight, and so this will be his first time trying to cut down to 125, and he will be getting a title shot in his UFC debut, which, for those who don't know, is nowadays is really just unheard of for the UFC to do. The last time I can really remember them doing that was when they got Strikeforce, and they wanted to do Gilbert Melendez versus Benson Henderson. And that was 2012 or 2013. It's been a long time since we've seen something like this. And it leaves the division in an interesting spot because now Kai Kara-France and Brandon Royval, they're both in the title conversation. You could argue that either of those guys deserve another shot. I think Kara-France would probably get it a little easier than Royval because Royval's already lost to Pantoja multiple times. But then you have Amir Albazi, who's fighting Brandon Moreno in November. If Albazi wins that fight, he's another guy who's on a huge win streak who you could argue deserves a title shot. So after November, you could maybe see a world where there's 3 top contenders at flyweight who none of them are going to get the title shot because Kai Asakura from Rizin is going to get it at UFC 310. So it's an interesting move. My theory for it, as I told you about earlier before the pod, I think this is a marketing move by the UFC because it's been a while since we've had a really, really good Japanese fighter. I mean, Tatsuro Taira is really the best one right now, and he just lost. So I would think from the UFC's perspective, if Asakura can get the job done, you immediately have a Japanese champion that you can bring over there. And in the age of social media, I think that you could really make a big fight in Japan and really grow the fan base in that area because I feel like we haven't gone there with a huge card in a while now. So I think that this is a business move. Not that Asakura isn't an amazing fighter. He's beaten some really good guys like Juan Archuleta, Horiguchi. beat both of those guys at 135, so it's not like he's fighting cans, you know what I mean? I mean, then look at Yuri Prohaska, for example. He was a champion at Rise, and look where he's at in the UFC. So they've clearly produced some really good talents. And I think that this could be a way where the UFC grows their audience again in Japan. And, obviously Asakura has to win the fight or look impressive to really make that happen, which is going to be tough because Pantoja, as me and you have said, I think you could argue he's one of the more underrated champions in the sport with how good he is all around. But it's an interesting spot that the flyweight division is in. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, he's also very exciting as Asakura from what I've seen so far. So it's kind of flyweight's still at this point where, but it's also I was about to say flyweight's at this point where it's still so wide open that they feel comfortable giving these up and comers like Steve Erceg and now Asakura these title shots, like, maybe sooner than they're really ready for. But it's also at the same time, like, yeah, like you just said, that there is now seemingly three top. Well, after Amir Albazi and Brandon Moreno fight, there's
possibly.
Possibly.
Because I think if Moreno wins, you just can't. He's lost to Pantoja 3 times.
That window's starting to close in a way, but at the same time for Pantoja, he really had to really grind to get to this title shot and
he's knock off a lot. Kept it for a while, yeah. He's doing good right now. Do you think that Pantoja looks at his fight agreements with scratching his head, thinking that it's gonna be somebody else, and he's like, Kai Asakura. He hasn't even made flyweight. He's just sitting there, and his manager just scratches his head. He's like, all right, why not? So I don't know. I think it's interesting, but I mean, Asakura, like you said, he's super exciting, really good striker. I think if he can keep this fight on the feet, it's an interesting matchup. But Pantoja, he's a bad dude, man. He makes guys look terrible. Erceg was really the only guy who's tested him so far in his title reign, and you wonder if Asakura could maybe do the same thing on the feet. But it's tough. It's a tough thing to stop his takedowns because Pantoja, he's a dog on the ground, but he's also not that bad on the feet either, and he fights with such a good pace too over the course of 5 rounds.
Well, I think it's important that, and it makes sense that they keep this door open for these newer guys, these up and comers, because like you said, they are very exciting, and these so Moreno, Albazi, Brandon Royval, Kai Car France, all of them, they've been here for a little while now, and Pantoja had to wait a long time to get his shot, so you kind of test Pantoja against these fresher matchups and stuff, and see if how dominant of a champion he really is. So
that's the way to do it, because it's a win-win really for the UFC. It may not seem like it right this second for fans who don't know Asakura, but if Pantoja keeps winning fights, his legacy is just going to get better and better, and he's beaten so many good guys at that weight class throughout his career, let alone his title reign. I think that if he wins, it only builds his resume further and further and makes it easier for the UFC to promote him. But obviously, if Asakura wins, like I mentioned, you tap into that Japanese fan base once again, which in my opinion is one of the best fan bases in the entire sport. The appreciation that they have for martial arts is just incredible. I always used to love watching the old events that they would have there because they're so quiet because they're actually watching, and the things that they cheer on are so incredible. You go to a place here and you have a guard pass, everybody's booing. But in Japan, if a guy passes somebody's guard, it's thunderous applause. They really know the sport and they appreciate all the fine details, which I think the UFC values, and I think they value it in terms of just wanting to make the best fights for the fans, but I think business-wise, they also value it because these people are such educated fight fans, and that can only help them business-wise. So
yeah, I think it's also about just seeing how much you're division can fluctuate and stuff. So let's say Royval did get the title shot or something like that, and maybe he had to pull out or something like that. Well, then you kind of, because if you're waiting for Amir Albazi and Brandon Moreno to fight, then, what do you do? So, like, with Kara France, for instance, do you just hand him the title shot, I guess?
That's the tough thing. Like, what do these guys all do in the meantime? Because this fight isn't happening till December. So, things are going to definitely have to play out. And a lot is going to matter after that card in November with Albazi and Moreno. I think if Albazi wins that fight, then you're really in an interesting predicament. And it's not exactly a bad one, having multiple guys who could fight for the title, but it's harder to sell when you can have the debate amongst fans. Oh, well, this guy deserves it, or this guy deserves it. I think that one of them really needs to get head and shoulders above the rest, and that's why things like this are happening. But yeah. I like what you said too about new blood. I think that's always a good thing, to add some new contenders to the division and spice things up a little bit, because you're right, those top guys, they've been around there for a while. Everybody really besides Albazi has been in that title picture for multiple years now. So I think someone like Asakura could definitely add some excitement. Obviously, we still have Tatsuro Taira, who, in my opinion, has shown that he still has a lot of potential, even in a loss.
Well, there's definitely and then if you want to compare this to Steve Erceg, I think there's like at least 2 times more of the pressure on Asakura than there was for Steve Erceg. Considering this is Asakura's UFC debut, his UFC debut, his flyweight debut,
and just immediately walking into a title shot, that's the most pressure that you could possibly take, because then if he doesn't
win, if he doesn't win, it's gonna take. I think it's because here's the thing: if Steve Erceg were to beat Kara France, like, Steve Erceg would kind of be like 1 fight away, I think, from getting back to the title shot. But for Asakura now, just stepping in at 125 for the first time, I think it would take like
if he gets mauled, then you're like, well, where is he at level wise? Like, then it's super unclear.
Yeah.
If obviously, even if he loses, if he has a fight like Steve Erceg did, I think he's in a much better position. But he at least has to look good losing or win this fight in order for fans to gravitate towards him. Because if he just gets destroyed, people are going to be like, this guy's a bum. Like, why did he get the title shot in the first place? And that's not good for the UFC. So that's the other thing with Asakura. He has to have that on his shoulders too. Not only is his pride and his legacy on the line here a little bit, but he also has a lot of pressure from the company to live up to the hype that they're giving him, which, like I said, they don't give to new fighters often. I mean, like I said, Gilbert Melendez fought Benson Henderson for the title in his debut in, I think, 2013. So it's been a long time since we've seen something like this, and it definitely adds a lot of pressure to the fight. So I think it's going to be interesting, though. I'm excited for it. I mean, like you said, new blood is always good for any division, but for this one especially, where we're in a weird place right now. I'm excited to see that fight in December, that's for sure. And obviously, that's going to be the co-main for Bilal Muhammad, Shavkat Rakhmonov. We got Nick Diaz versus Vicente Luque on that card. That's going to be a fun one to end the year off with a nice pay-per-view. But next week, there is another UFC event, but I think that we're probably going to end up talking about the PFL, because Francis Ngannou is returning to MMA. It's been a long time, man. So that'll be interesting. And he's fighting Renan Ferreira, who is a very, very dangerous fight for him. It's going to be for the heavyweight title. And this is a big thing for the PFL. I mean, Francis Ngannou's finally getting in the cage for them. We've, with boxing, and obviously he had the personal tragedy, which is with his son, which was horrible. His MMA return has been delayed. That's for sure. So I'm sure the PFL is very happy to see him getting in there.
Them. I really hope. So, like, when I say comes and goes, I don't mean it in the sense that, it feels like the fight just happened and nothing. No one really got anticipated all that much for or whatever. But when I say I hope it doesn't come and go this fight, is that whoever wins, I really hope that, like, okay, like, that's it. That can truly be, like, your new face of the PFL. Like, you're a freaking heavyweight champion, you know? So, like, I really hope that they do, you know, that it is, they are going to bring in a lot more fans to, you know, stick with them and just throughout the whole way, and whoever Francis or Renan Ferreira fight next, like, everyone is tuned into it and excited for it. So
I'll say this: the PFL definitely has to get this one right. They have
yeah,
to.
that's what I'm saying.
This is
yeah.
such a big event for them, and especially with all the talk recently too, with how they kind of, you know, had to smear Kayla Harrison to build up Larissa Pacheco, which Pacheco didn't even particularly like, and you know, just some of the statements that they've made that are a bit outlandish, but you know, it can all go away if they just make a banger of an event here, and they definitely do have one, and this is a great main event. I think it's a good fight for Ngannou for his return. Like you said, whoever wins this fight, if done right, can become the face of the whole promotion, and that's a big deal for them. So hopefully, for their sake and for the fans' sake too, because it's just good to have competition for the UFC, because then they won't get stale. But yeah, the PFL definitely needs to get this one right. That's for sure, and I hope they do, because it'll be more fun to talk about next week, obviously, if it's a positive conversation versus a negative one. But yeah, can't wait to see that. Like I said, it's been a while since we've seen Francis Ngannou in the cage. It feels like he's coming home to MMA. So I can't wait to see it. And if you guys enjoyed the pod, like the video, subscribe, and we will see you all next week.
Just like a superstar, doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing when you going hard.